wanted to thank everybody for joining us on today's webinar. I'm Kevin Martin. I am the VP of Marketing here at SBT Alliance. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Safe Space Initiative and Safer School Environments with IoT. We have a really great panel of speakers today, and I look forward to an engaging and informative discussion with them around the intersection of school and facility, safety and technology, and how all of these components can complement each other and work well together to create safer spaces, especially within school environments. As we begin, before we begin, there's a few housekeeping items that we have to go through. Firstly, that the views expressed by the speakers and third parties are those of the speaker and the third parties and not necessarily SBT. Recommendations in this webinar are advisory in nature and informational in content. Today's webinar is on the Zoom platform, something that I think all have gotten used to over the last few months. Throughout today's discussion, we will issue a few polls throughout, and we'll host a Q&A session at the end of the event. The polls will automatically appear when initiated. All you have to do is simply choose your answer and hit submit, and it'll be recorded. And for questions, if you have a question throughout any point in time in the webinar, there is a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, a new window will pop up. Simply type in your question and submit it for an answer. Now, we do have a bunch of people on the webinar. I will do my best to get to all of the questions. If I don't get to all of the questions, I will be following up post-show via email to answer your questions. Today's speakers include folks from SBT and SBT's IoT partner ecosystem. Joining us today, we have Shane Acernese, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of SBT Alliance. We have Tony Garcia, who is the Chief Technology Officer of SBT. We have Tony Acernese, who is the founder and CEO of Intelli-Green. Ryan Robinson was scheduled to be with us today. He's the Senior Vice President of Strategy at Intelli-Green. He couldn't come today, unfortunately. Tanuj Mohan is the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder at Enlighted, a Siemens company. And we also have Colm Nee, who is Senior Vice President of Product and Strategy at Enlighted. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate you guys making the time to be on this informative webinar, and I look forward to an engaging conversation. So thank you for that. Today's discussion is going to be broken up into 4 sections. The first section is going to be a day in the life, exposing the operational challenges of school environments in today's day and age. Next, we're going to migrate into a conversation around applying technology to combat these operational challenges. In the third section of today's webinar, we'll dig into the details, get into the weeds, and really understand the technologies that are at play underneath the Safe Space Initiative to safeguard school facilities. And then lastly, we're going to have a Q&A. Before we kick that off, we did have our first poll, and I did want to launch that. The question is, why did you decide to attend today's event? The options are there, and if you could submit your answers, that would be terrific. And we'll get to those a little bit later on. So as we kick off this webinar, and as many of our audience members know firsthand, a lot of them, because we do have some teachers and principals and administrators on today's call, K-12 leaders and teachers and staff are charged with a litany of challenging duties, including balancing 3 critical and often competing responsibilities. First and foremost, the health and safety of their people, the role that their school plays in their larger community, and most importantly, the effective teaching of their students. Schools are really meant to foster student collaboration, provide opportunities for socializing, and really building a sense of community. And unfortunately, today, students' day-to-day experiences are ultimately disrupted. When asked by Education Week in a recent article, administrators really focused on the importance of that in-person schooling and that while it is critically important to the development of students, there is an initial need to really showcase that in-person schooling can be done safely in today's day and age. And that really means developing a rock solid plan for contact tracing, for cleaning, for safety protocols, and communicating those effectively, and then adhering to them. These are the critical steps for proceeding to a return to in-person schooling. And it's really in that spirit that the Safe Space Initiative was really born. The initiative really aims to equip K-12 school districts and facilities with the tools and technologies that they need to safeguard school health, streamline operations, and foster really the general betterment of students, staff, parents, and the local community. And what does that really mean? And what is SBT's role in this? And when we really look at it, day in and day out, Smarter Building Technologies is working with clients to improve operations and maintenance and make spaces smarter through the latest Internet of Things technologies. And what has occurred over the last few months is our solutions team really started to think things through, and they were asking themselves, well, why don't we use these same technologies to go further and really foster the health and the safety and the compliance of spaces as well? And that's really the core of our Safe Space initiative, why we've pooled together this really wonderful team of technology companies to provide innovative solutions for some really difficult challenges. And it's with that as we continue down this journey of discovery, I wanted to start today's conversation with Tanuj, and really looking at a day in the life and exposing the operational challenges that schools have today. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Tanuj.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. COVID-19 spreads either when you breathe the virus in or you touch something and you touch your eyes, nose, or face. So that's typically how COVID-19 spreads. And a lot of what we can do about it is educate folks so that we both prevent and minimize the spread. And I would like to start from the journey at home when a student is getting ready to go to school. So it's very important that the student make sure that, or even the staff or the teacher make sure that they're not running a fever, they have not come in contact with somebody who might have had COVID. And if they are in the high risk category, they stay at home. So once they've gone through that internal checklist, they should make sure they carry a mask and then get to school. And when you go to school, if you can use private transport, that's the right thing to do. But let's say you have to take public transport. And now you have to think about how, as an individual, you can prevent getting the disease, I mean, yourself getting the disease, and how you can minimize spreading the disease. So that is kind of the behavior, the good behavior. We will try and make sure that individuals learn and teachers and staff reinforce. So let's just look at how do you go from home to the school. So the first thing you should do when you leave your home is sanitize or wash your hands. And when you come to the bus, let's say you're using public transport and you're using the handrail, you have prevented infecting the handrail if you had COVID-19 and were asymptomatic. But as soon as you have touched the handrail, now you have to go into the mode of preventing yourself from catching it if somebody else who had contaminated the surface had touched it before you. So as soon as you get into the bus, you should sanitize your hands again. Then as you load a bus, you should look at how do you load the bus. You should probably go to the end of the bus first, so that as people load the bus and come to the front, they are not coming in contact with each other. If you're in the bus and you can open the windows, then keep the windows open because you want the airflow to be as good as possible with outside air coming in. And if possible, you should leave every alternate row empty so that you are doing physical distancing. So we have heard these terms time and again: wear a mask, wash your hands, be physically distant. So these are the same concepts you need to keep in your head and understand the whys. Why are you doing this? And make sure that in your journey, everyone remembers those facts. So let's say you loaded the bus from the back to the front with social distancing, with windows open. Then when you unload, you would obviously unload, front to the back. So people are not passing each other in a confined space. Now let's come to the school. When you come into the school, and other speakers will talk about the technology to help with this, you will have some school entrance protocols. But what's important there is to be respectful, that whatever screening you do it with respect, and you maintain the confidentiality of the students, the staff, and the teachers. So there are privacy laws from ADA, federal and state privacy laws. You must adhere to all of them. So at every given time, you should make sure that confidentiality and respect. When you do that, whatever protocols you put in place will be effective. Once in the school, same concepts apply. If you are in a classroom, you want to make sure that your students are 6 foot apart. And if possible, they stay in the same classroom. So you don't have students running around, changing classrooms and mixing with more students. So those concepts are minimize, minimize the exposure, minimize the groups. When you look at the HVAC system in the school, for example, same concept, you need proper airflow. If you have demand control, ventilation, or smart ventilation, this actually might be the time to turn it off and blast the school with air, maybe 2 hours before the school opens and 2 hours after the school shuts. So you want a lot of air movement. If you could, you should take your students and have your class in the fields, in the open air. So every time you do something, think, is there a way of minimizing the risk, either preventing yourself from getting it or transmitting it? And that is the feeling that, every person should be educated to look at the simplest of things and say, there's something we can do better. Cafeteria and restrooms, maybe most schools will have their cafeterias shut because that's a spot for a lot of mingling and a lot of chances of spread. Going back to the school entrance, same thing would apply for the cafeteria. You might want to stagger the entrances to areas that are opened up. You don't want everybody arriving at the same time. So staggering, how you do things so that you minimize interactions and have good physical distancing is something else that you should always be there in whatever you do. Let's look at, now you are exiting the school. The technology folks will talk about, what the lighting could do for you. Maybe if you want people not to go into zones, the lights won't turn on, indicating those are no-go zones. The lights actually might have UV sterilization concepts in them, so that when there are no students, you could run sanitization and cleaning. Technology could also help you with cleaning and sanitization, that it's automated. So you know where people have been and where you need to sanitize, and that the sanitization was done. Now let's look at, you're exiting the school, and there you need to have a plan. If somebody does fall sick in the school, you need to have a plan. You need to know where the student should be held and how you can safely get the student home. So the last part of prevention minimization is that you have a plan. When you get the student back home, you also have to make sure that the folks that he came in contact, or she came in contact with during the school, are, during the day, are also informed, and they stay at home till either a positive or negative COVID test shows up. And if it's a positive test show up, we should go back to testing the kids who might have come in contact with COVID-19, even though they are asymptomatic. So luckily for us, kids are, I think, 20 times less likely to develop, they're not immune, but less likely to develop severe symptoms compared to an adult. So it is also important that when you're back at home, parents, teachers, everybody realizes that the students might be asymptomatic, but to take it seriously and test the students in case they have been exposed. So again, boiling it down to same things: wear a mask, be physically distant, wash your hands, and get tested. So those are the concepts that you should apply throughout your journey. So I'll hand it off now for the technology folks to talk about how you look at these things and how technology can help you.
Great. Thank you very much, Tanuj. Yeah, and that really is it, right? I know a lot of the audience members, they're in the school environment on a daily basis. This is front and center for them. And I think one of the things that we want to uncover in today's conversation, using that as really the foundation, is, how are we applying technology to combat these operational challenges? Because they exist across the spectrum. So, to lead us in this conversation, I'd like to introduce Shane Acernese from SBT to really give us a high-level overview of the technologies that SBT and the Safe Space Initiative is applying with our partners to combat these challenges. So with that, I will turn it over to Shane. Go ahead, Shane.
Oh, thanks so much. There was a little bit of a lag. I apologize for that. So, what we look for is holistic solutions for helping get our customers the most out of transitioning the facility to a safer and energy efficient space. I'm going to cover IoT network and lighting, HVAC monitoring and control, germicidal UV, as well as touch on temperature scanning, because holistically, pulling all of these together is the solution set that would get the best results. With that being said, the application of integrating IoT technologies it's as varied as the complex issues that face everyone's facility managers day in and day out. Our goal is to help streamline this operational process, improve efficiency, and make things smarter and most of all, safer. But the networked control systems offered today, they offer an ideal digital platform to gather advanced energy analytics and to help build custom applications that drive deeper occupant connectivity and facility analytics. Network controls, further enable end users to customize zones within the facility with a click of a button. And with advanced system support from SBT Alliance and our partners, we're able to provide system technicians the capability to monitor performance and to ensure each zone delivers the highest possible value. Everything from occupancy sensing to heat mapping to taking things a step further and leveraging big data analytics to provide more in-depth insight into facilities, zones, and occupants through interactive heat mapping and emergency location tracking. This topic is very deep, and we have our friends and experts that are going to speak to you a little bit later on the presentation from Enlighted to jump into this a bit further and provide data in regards to those solutions. In regards to HVAC, it's a lot more complicated than just providing, air quality measurements or particular matter measurements, humidity. We even could, provide the capability of sensing if there's vaping or smoking in an environment. We could help with offsets in regards to motion. We even have capabilities of tracking noise levels. But one of the really important things we've seen is being able to integrate this information into the building's existing HVAC through a BAS or a building automated system to ensure the ventilation systems in the facility work just as well before COVID as they do after. One of the things that I've seen and I've been on some support calls with is some of these facility managers are reaching out to us saying, we really haven't had full-scale shutdowns. And with that being said, for building heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems that have been shut down or set back, how do we properly restart these systems? What's the standard practice for inspection and maintenance of commercial HVAC systems? We went a step further to realize that to minimize the risk of Legionnaire's disease or other diseases associated with water and HVAC, it's important to take steps to allow all the systems and the features to be started back up properly after a prolonged shutdown. And we have the capability to help that process take place and to measure the effectiveness of those systems before as well as after shutdowns that take place due to events like COVID or something else that could cause a prolonged facility shutdown. We've also have experience with school gyms and cafeteria lighting applications. For instance, some modular high bays. They can be equipped to break down viruses, bacteria, fungus, mold, and spores with UVC modules. And additionally, we use some UVA modules that will further assist in breaking down bacteria. We work in classrooms and hallways a little different. We use everything from can fixtures that are similar to UVC technology. They're far UVC, and they provide the same disruption and breakdown of viruses and bacteria, but without the typical harmful effects to the human body. We work with air handling troffer fixtures. They're a multi-use device acting both as a light source for a classroom, but also as an air filtration system. This basic retrofit light can sanitize 99% of airborne pathogens as they pass through the filtration system at a rate of about 50 CFM. But most importantly is the control strategy and how are we going to effectively manage these solutions. Optimally, all lighting will be controlled on a separate secure circuit with an integrated control system. Controls will provide distributed monitoring for fail-safe reporting while creating an additional level of management and security. Additionally, the control systems will track the total hours of use of each device, along with the device failure and maximizing the efficiency of maintenance and replacement. Many of the new UVC devices require a regular amount of maintenance, and these control systems can help us to understand when those maintenance FMs need to take place so that we're not spending costly money maintaining product that maybe might not need to be maintained yet. And on the opposite end, to ensure that the systems are always at the highest level of functionality, keeping our spaces safe. We also use temperature scanning and access controls. And everyone knows what a fever being a leading symptom for COVID-19, but it's also for several other infectious diseases. Now, we work with Intelli-Temp, and they provided us with an added layer of defense and peace of mind to each facility. And our friends at Intelli-Temp will talk to us in more detail about how their technologies work. We're super excited to work with everyone and to provide a solution that could offer a safe and more energy efficient environment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shane. I think it's a good overview to really illustrate that, at the core of the Safe Space Initiative is really bringing together these independent siloed technologies and putting it into a holistic platform. So it's easy to use, user friendly, and it provides a management mechanism for school facilities and facilities in general to easily maintain these systems. So thank you for that quick overview there, Shane. I appreciate it. So, as we've, taken the conversation from a very high level, looking at the challenges, how we're combating it from a technology perspective, what I wanted to do is really start digging into the details of these technologies. What are they? How are we deploying them? And then how are they, providing positive use cases for school districts around the country and for facilities around the country, for that matter. And, that leads me to the first stage of everything is combating, entrance protocols. What are folks doing to safeguard, the folks that are entering buildings, through temperature sensing. So I wanted to launch this next poll, and it really just looks at, have you experienced any kind of temperature sensing exercise in entering a facility recently? I know I have personally, and I'm sure a lot of people, it's getting up there, about 100% have gotten one of these. So, to turn this over, I wanted to introduce Tony Acernese. He's going to talk about the Intelli-Temp scanners and how they're playing their part in the Safe Space Initiative. So with that, Tony, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about entry of buildings. So happy to partner with SBT and the Safe Space Initiative. Really, controlling that access point is pretty important, as Shane stated that, there's a pretty strong correlation between a high reference temperature and some sort of infectious disease. So we developed two different devices to quickly and accurately and reliably scan reference temperatures upon entering a building. So there are two devices. They do have some slight differences depending upon the specific need for the facility. But basically, either device has the ability for a student or employee to walk up near the device and get their temperature taken in less than a second. We do have these devices deployed throughout the country in several school districts, as well as several hospital systems, in order to remove that person that's using the hand scanner at the door, and provide a more accurate, fast temperature scanning to a 0.5 degree Fahrenheit at about 10 to 15 people per minute. So the difference between the two devices, we put this on a chart. First is just the screen size. The Intelli-Temp has 8-inch, while the Max has a 22-inch screen. The biggest difference there is that you have the ability to publish content as well to the 22-inch screen. So anything from a banner, or anything that you'd like to your students to read on the way in, or could be a clip from the basketball game that happened the night before. But really any information that you want to get out to them, as well as your logo, could be displayed, and it's attractive. And you could publish that content very easily to the device from a web portal. Both devices have the ability to have mask detection. So if you don't have a mask on, we have the ability for the device to tell you, please wear a mask. In most cases, that certainly makes sense today. The temperature accuracy is the same on both. It does measure reference temperature, not internal body temperature. So it measures the temperature of the forehead to 1/2 of a degree in Fahrenheit. There's a difference in the types of stands. So the original Intelli-Temp has both a desk stand and a taller stand. So for the elementary students, typically we're using a smaller desk stand that can be placed on a small desk near that entrance. The Intelli-Temp Max, which is a larger device, it's actually over my shoulder here, only has a taller stand. The kiosk, the larger Intelli-Temp Max, does come with that software so that you have the ability to publish content. It also has a hand sanitizing station that will dispense over 3,200 dispenses of foam hand sanitizer. On both devices, we have email notifications that can go out for a high temperature, as well as facial recognition. We could turn that on or off. Most schools don't have facial recognition turned on. Basically detects that you have a face and then quickly takes your temperature. We also have the ability to integrate with card readers if your students do have cards. And then the Intelli-Temp unit also has the ability to have access control. Most schools that we're working with today are not using the access control. Some commercial industrial facilities and hospitals are using that for turnstile or to tie into their existing access management platform. Both items come with a 3-year warranty.
Nice. I did have a quick question for you, Tony. You made reference of the school districts that these devices have been deployed to. It was really replacing the hand scanners. Can you kind of talk to that a little bit and why those schools chose to do that, and what are the differences between the Intelli-Temp scanners and these hand scanners?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. I think it's probably the most common question that I get asked by someone, right? I think almost everyone, that's the first solution they came to. Okay, I need to take temperatures, so I'll go buy the $20 hand scanner and just have someone go ahead and take reference temperatures. I think that's the most common because really two benefits to it. One is they're really easy to obtain, and two, they're generally inexpensive, $20, $30 each. But there are quite a few drawbacks to that process. So the one is that typical accuracy on most of those devices is plus or minus 1.5 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit. So 3 to 4 degrees, which is a wider swing than I think most people should be comfortable with. The other major issue is the close proximity that someone needs to come in to actually scan your forehead. Unfortunately, have a real life scenario on that. Ryan Robinson, who was supposed to join us on the call today, unfortunately has been diagnosed with COVID yesterday. So he's doing well, but he's resting. But they actually contact traced it back to a physical therapy appointment where he was exposed to a receptionist that was scanning several people with a handheld device. So she's behind a plexiglass barrier, basically scanned his forehead. And as we know more and more about this and other infectious diseases, there's a reason for social distancing, right? So I'm assuming that fairly soon the CDC will probably stop recommending the use of these types of devices for that purpose.
Yeah, that's unbelievably Yeah, that's crazy. You really don't think about that, and then when you hear something like that, it kind of it does hit close to home, and I'm sure a lot of our attendees have had similar experiences with that. We do have a quick question, Tony Acernese, while I have you on the phone. Does the Intelli-Temp have a BACnet interface for a network, or how does the networking work for it?
It is not BACnet, but we do have the ability to push selected information to a secure FTP server, where then you can pull that data at a specific cadence. So we would just update before you'd pull that data. So we have the ability to network that into whatever access control or attendance needs that you might have.
Okay, great. All right, terrific. Well, thank you for that overview, Tony. I appreciate that, and I think it brings up a lot of important topics when you start thinking about confronting entrance protocols and some of the things that Tanuj had brought up earlier in the call, and how we're approaching it from a little bit of a different angle with a bit more sophisticated technology to ensure the health and safety of entrance. Facility and people entering facilities. I did want to kind of change it on over. Tony Acernese brought up a few good points here about Ryan's experience with handhelds, but also the importance of contact tracing and how that information provides valuable information for departments of health and internal organizations as well. So to really dig into that digital infrastructure that Shane started to allude to, the use case of contact tracing and a lot of the other things that Tanuj has brought up, I'd like to introduce Colm to give us a dig deep into the Enlighted digital platform that we're utilizing for the Safe Space Initiative, and to provide us some background on that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Colm.
Thanks, Kevin, and good afternoon, everyone. So Enlighted is an IoT platform with solutions focused on creating safe and occupant-centric buildings. And I'm going to be talking today specifically around how indoor location technology can be used to help schools meet their safety objectives by creating a human-centric building. So, COVID-19 has obviously fundamentally changed the way that we live and the way that we work. And a recent study published by McKinsey actually, suggests that the adoption of digital tools by organizations has been accelerated by as much as 5 years. We're facing a climate of uncertainty, and many of us across multiple industries are really struggling to figure out what to expect in the new normal. And research, of course, shows that most parents do want their kids to return to school, but they only want this with major adjustments. And the most pressing concerns are things like daily disinfection and the availability of PPE, regular temperature checks, and social distancing, all of which are considered essential. Obviously, this presents huge operational challenges for superintendents and for facility managers who need to pivot their processes to quickly adapt to this new normal. So when you talk about creating an occupant-centric or human-centric building, there are really two important aspects to this. One is safety and wellness, and this has never been more important than it is today. And the other one is productivity. And on safety, what we're really talking about is how to return with confidence by taking adequate precautions, knowing that you're able to keep adapting to emerging needs as your occupancy planning is evolving. And that's not only around providing confidence for teachers, students, and parents, but also for superintendents and administrators that your initiatives are working as intended. And when it comes to the use of IoT data from the physical space to help navigate this new normal, there are three important areas. The first one is really being able to understand how occupants are interacting for the purposes of contact tracing and identifying high-risk areas. The second is responding to occupancy patterns by creating responsive and fact-based cleaning schedules by focusing on areas of highest impact and highest relevance. And finally, is by optimizing the ventilation system based on actual occupancy to ensure optimal indoor air quality. And the productivity benefit that you get in the long run is from fundamentally understanding how students and staff are using the facilities to ensure that you're creating environments that enable a fundamentally better learning experience. For the remainder of this presentation, I'll be talking about how IoT technology and how indoor location technology can be used to help people come back to school safely and with confidence by enabling administrators to monitor the success of their return to school policies. So at the moment, it's pretty hard to talk about occupant health without focusing on COVID. And when you break it down and analyze the official guidelines from the World Health Organization and others, there are really three distinct routes for transmission and three different ways in which you can leverage technology to support your efforts. And the first is really by close proximity to an infected person for a short time. Obviously, social distancing is focused on minimizing this risk factor, and we'll talk specifically about contact tracing as a way of proactive and reactive risk mitigation. The second is by touching contaminated surfaces and objects, with your hands typically acting as a conduit to your eyes, nose, or mouth. And here we're going to talk about how technology can help you make decisions on which areas to focus your janitorial efforts, especially where you have limited resources. And the third is by having extended exposure to an infected person in a poorly ventilated space. And here we're going to touch briefly on how ventilation systems can be driven dynamically based on the demand from the space. So let's focus first on the risk factor of physical proximity, and let's talk a little bit about contact tracing. So I'm sure we all know what contact tracing is right now, but essentially it's the process of discovering who came into contact with whom. And this has primary and secondary benefits. The primary benefit is, of course, reacting to known interactions an infected person had by recommending quarantine to limit the potential spread. And obviously here, manual contact tracing can be deployed and generally relies on having dedicated resources to follow up on cases manually by interview. And this is a great start, but it is ultimately limited by human memory. And so it is proven to be unlikely that a person will be able to accurately recall their in-person interactions over multiple days. And the benefit from this technology, which you can see illustrated in these slides, is it enables you to be a lot more incisive about the contacts that have happened and thus your interventions. It also allows you to react with a lot more speed, potentially saving you hours or days in responding. The secondary benefit, once you know where the contacts are taking place, is that you can react by changing the setup of your facility to reduce potential hotspots for interactions. This is only possible where IoT technology is deployed, and the process of capturing, storing, and analyzing data has been automated. So, manual contact tracing versus automated contact tracing often requires an order of magnitude more people to self-quarantine, and at schools, this can mean shutdowns for weeks based on only a handful of cases. So how does location-based contact tracing work? Well, typically you have a grid of sensors installed and you would hand out smart badges to all those occupants you would like to be able to trace contacts and location for. And with a real-time location algorithm, these systems are able to calculate the location of occupants in the indoor space. So it's kind of like a GPS, but for buildings. This system can then automatically record the distance between badges, and thus people, and the duration of contact. They also serve as a system of record for the location of the person, which can be invaluable for optimizing janitorial efforts. In collecting this data, you're also able to obtain a rich history of contact data, which empowers you so that you understand which areas are the busiest, the riskiest, and the most overcapacity across your real estate footprint. And finally, it allows you to perform automated contact tracing based on facts, based on generated data, which can significantly increase the speed and precision of your contact tracers and your contact tracing workflow. So let's talk quickly about privacy. So privacy is often an understandable hesitation around this process. And whilst attaching names or contact details to tag information does make the process a lot more efficient, if you really need to, you are still able to balance the need for privacy on one hand and the need for safety by designing the workflow to be completely anonymous and opt-in. So consider the following privacy-first user journey. You turn up at the school and you're given a Bluetooth-enabled ID badge. Only you, the holder of the badge, knows the ID, the random ID of the badge. So obviously then you're encouraged to carry the Bluetooth ID badge with you throughout the day. Then at some point, probably much later in time, the school informs you that there's been a COVID case and you can check a list of published ID badges, a list of public badge IDs which may be affected, and thus whether you have been in contact with somebody who is confirmed or suspected to be ill. You can then decide, obviously, with your school, whether it makes sense for you to self-quarantine. So this process is completely anonymous, it's opt-in, and data is only collected when the person is on building premises, thus minimizing privacy concerns. So let's talk quickly about that second infection route of surface and object-based transmission. So for this problem, IoT data can help you by providing insights on where people have been. So this helps you make better decisions around cleaning. If you have limited resources or you require new cleaning workflows, then it's much better to base them on actual data. And data allows you to understand, both in real time and historically, which spaces are being heavily utilized and play back paths for infected persons. This allows you to be more proactive around reducing risk by focusing efforts on the most impacted spaces. It also allows you to react quickly in the event of an outbreak by replaying paths for potentially infected people and deep cleaning those areas. Finally, let's talk about transmission based on sharing a poorly ventilated area with an infected person. So studies have shown that airborne virus transmission increases as the ventilation quality decreases. This means that changes to building operations, including HVAC systems, can reduce airborne exposures. So to make an informed decision on ventilation and purification strategies, continuous air quality monitoring is highly recommended. ASHRAE recommends specifically operating your HVAC systems to maintain a maximum CO2 concentration of less than 1,000 parts per million. And so to ensure that this maximum is not exceeded, it's good practice to not only measure the air quality, but also to adjust your ventilation and filtration strategy based on demand, i.e. when those rooms have higher occupancy. So this is where IoT data comes into play, and you should look to integrate real-time occupancy data based from your location engine with the building management system to automate the ventilation system. And so, one final thought that I'll leave you with is the following. So if we're not as safe at home, as we are in our workplaces and at our schools, then ultimately we failed, because the purpose of our home is ultimately not to work. And so we have to raise the expectations of our facilities. And the systems that we install in those facilities and the data they collect must enhance the safety and wellness of the occupants. And so that's kind of my final thought, and that's it from me.
Nice. Well, thank you very much, Colm, for digging into that and giving us some in the weeds looks and at the use cases and the importance and the capabilities of IoT systems. I think that really, I think drove the point home that, the manual contact tracing can be very limited in terms of its effectiveness, where when you start introducing technology, like along with Intelli-Temp, you're getting higher accuracy and you're really driving home a safer space. So thank you for that detail. In the last piece of this, as we start looking at, all the different angles of the Safe Space Initiative, we're looking at entrance protocols, we're looking at contact tracing, data-driven sanitization and cleaning management, how do we pull all these systems together? How do we make all of this, work together? And what are some of the pitfalls that, we really need to, keep our eye on and avoid those right hooks? I want to introduce Tony Garcia to, talk us through, the deployment of this and where do you start? So with that, I'll turn that over to Tony.
Thanks, Kevin, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, as we've learned in this webinar, there are many different products, technologies, and manufacturers involved with this type of solution. So it is vital to have an experienced system integrator that will take a holistic approach, ensuring that the solution meets customer needs or customer expectations. basically, you can't look at the different technologies in this solution. You must look at the complete solution, simply because all the pieces of the puzzle must function together. So that being said, you know, obviously there's a lot of detail that we can go into for each one of these steps, but for now, let's take a look at the top considerations and evaluate. Okay, so for design and logistics, this is the foundation of a successful deployment. Basically, when you have a weak design, it is extremely difficult to recover from that and to bring the system back together at 100%. So a couple of things that you need from a system integrator is you need to understand both the customer's needs and also the limitations and the features of the different technologies and products involved. Also, having proper logistics and project management is important to maintain project timelines. There's many different systems, lots of different pieces and components, different installers, subcontractors. You got to have good project management to keep the project in order and on schedule. Now, pre-configuration. What this is for a lot of these advanced systems, there's a lot of tracking, device tracking, and coordinating with installers. So there's a lot of things that can be done before shipping. Things like recording serial numbers, pre-packaging devices with labels of boxes that are specifically assigned to different rooms or hallways or locations. Those type of things can significantly improve the installation progress and commissioning. Now, as far as system commissioning and provisioning, this is the most important part of a project to ensure that things go smoothly. Now, and then if we look at this from the installation perspective, all the devices need to be tested and verified. So if you have an installer who's installing a thermostat or installing a light controller or a sensor, typically those devices have a self-testing feature where they can press a button and they can learn that the device is installed correctly, it does have power. Now, it doesn't stop there, right? When we look at these systems, there are many different components. There's tags, there's sensors, there's gateways, there's a network, there's a cloud server. Those are, because of the nature of all those components, you have to also do testing and verification from the top down, not just from the end devices. So during the commissioning process, the commissioning company has to come in, has to discover all of the devices, ensure that everything is on the network, zone them, schedule them, fine-tune them, and also do a verification to make sure that all of the devices are functional and working as they are expected. Now, some system integrators like SBT have special techniques and tools that they use to make commissioning more efficient. And those type of things they save money, they improve the installation progress, and it's more comfortable for the installer and the end user. Now, once a system is commissioned, there's a process of provisioning, which includes closeout documentation, as-built documentation, which includes network diagrams, design device floor plans, basically the documents that will help future troubleshooting and upgrade. There's nothing worse than coming back to a project that was installed 1, 2, 3 years ago, and there's no documentation indicating where devices are specifically installed, how the network backbone is connected and configured. When you walk into something like that, it's extremely difficult, almost impossible to figure out where things are. So having those documentations are extremely important. Now, ongoing support and optimization. When you have a complex IoT solution like Safe Spaces, which includes several different manufacturers and technology, it's important to have a system integrator that can provide a holistic support program for the customer. For example, you do not want to give the customer a list of 5 phone numbers for 5 different manufacturers to contact when something's not working. I mean, imagine they call one of the numbers, there's something wrong with this device, that person can respond with, oh, that's not our device, call this number. It would be a real big mess. So having a system integrator that can provide that one-stop support, that whether it be inputting a ticket, having chat, video conferencing, phone numbers, being able to get the support you need when you need it. And usually when you get to the end of a project, there's a end user training. And in this training session, whether it's 1-2 hours, maybe it's 2 days, depending on the system itself, the end user training is a time where the system integrator works with the end customer to train them on how to use the system, what to do if something goes wrong. Sometimes there are simple things, like rebooting your computer that sometimes fixes things. Just to make sure that the customer knows what to do, knows who to call, and knows how to get support when they need it. And then the last topic here, or the last step here, is optimization. So just to mention that over the years of deploying advanced network systems, we've learned that there's a lot of information in these systems. There's a lot of opportunity to go in, analyze the data that's in there, figure out ways to optimize the system, see how the customer is using it. Maybe we change schedules, maybe we set temperatures differently, maybe we turn fans on in a different order, all sorts of different optimization opportunities. And that's basically it. So, just summing this up very quickly, I would say in order to have a successful Safe Spaces project deployment, it's important to work with a big league systems integrator like SBT.
All right, thank you, Tony. For that, and I think you bring up a lot of really good points there. As we get ready to go into our Q&A session, I did want to launch one more poll here, and it really is looking at what percentage of the information today was new to you. So I encourage you to check that out, and as we start to get into the questions here, I'm going to kind of sift through here. So actually, this one might be for you, Tony Acernese. The question is, if an employee comes into the office with a temperature, will HR be notified, and will they be restricted entrance into the building?
That's a great question. So we do have the ability to set up access control. So typically the way that is set up right now is, so the person will walk in, they'll get their temperature scanned. At that point in time, if the temperature is above the preset value, there is an automated email that will occur, that will go to the email address of that HR manager that we do set. As far as access, we have the ability to tie the device into an additional access control device. So typically there's a card scanner if there's a door with a magnetic lock. The way the device works, it actually has a 12-volt relay, and that relay ties to that card scanner. So the card scanner will not be active. You will not be able to scan in unless you have a successful scan through the temperature scanner first. So for instance, you come in, let's say we have the device set to, you need to have a mask on and you need to have a temperature below 100.4. You have a successful scan with a normal temperature. It knows that you have a mask on. At that point, you'll have a preset amount of seconds so that you can scan your card with the pre-existing card scanner to gain access. So to tie it all back in, basically that email will be sent in that specific instance. The email will be sent, and that person would not gain access to the building.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Cool. Thank you for that, Tony. There is another question here. Is there a way an employer can reveal personally identifiable data about employees that are not related to contact tracing? And I guess maybe that's for Tanuj or Colm, maybe even you, Tony Acernese. Can they reveal any kind of personal identification?
It depends how it's set up, but generally, no. I think folks are very, very conscientious these days. Even if they had it, it typically doesn't get used for the purpose it was not meant for. I think privacy laws in Europe with GDPR, then in California, have made employers and organizations very sensitive to violating privacy or PII data, and the fines are substantial. So I think good behavior has already come to most employers, but technology can be implemented in such a way that it makes that point moot. As Colm was saying, as Tony also said, that you could have a facial recognition system that doesn't actually recognize the face. It just says it's a face. when we distribute badges, you could even have a system where you can enforce the badges, but there's a box of badges that a student picks up, takes one badge. Nobody knows who got what badge. And when you go leave for your home, you drop the badge in. And all it will know is, hey, there was a student or a teacher, you might have different badges for them. This is how they moved around the space. And you can figure out the hot spots. You can do things even in a totally anonymous fashion. You could ask the students and teachers to scan the badge on their phone or take a picture of it so they know the ID. And if something happens, say, hey, can you upload the ID of the badges you had during those days if you got COVID? And we will tell you which badges would get infected. And that way the school would never know who had what badge. And it would just be that, hey, the person reported they had COVID and these were the last 5 days, the badges they had. And we would run the report and say, these are the other 30 badges that might have been exposed. Send a message to all the students and teachers and say, look at the badges you had. If you had one of those badges, do what you need to. So that there is no way of the school employees or the employer knowing where the badges were. So there's always a way of deploying technology that leaves it completely anonymous.
Nice, nice. Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Thank you for that. Another question here, and maybe this one is for you, Shane. We talked about I guess at a high level the 4 elements of safe spaces, right? And does a facility need to implement all of these? How does that deployment really kick off, and how have you seen it be deployed thus far? I guess that's the best way to characterize that.
Great. And that question is not unique. It's something we hear all the time. We begin with a needs analysis. Part of that needs analysis is walking through the day in the life of the student and under, just like our friends have said, and understand how that works within each of the individual schools. Some schools state, hey, due to funding issues, maybe we have to phase this over implementing a technology every 3 months, while other schools have utilized some great funding that's available. For instance, there's CARES Act funding that we had some schools implement. In addition to CARES Act, there's some software as a service financing metrics that we've seen some schools have a lot of interest in. Some of our customers have said, is there a way that we could make our school safer and more efficient at the same time so that we could take our energy savings and utilize that savings to offset the costs associated with a safer space, so that at the end of the day, we're cash flow positive or maybe cash flow neutral, but we know we have a more efficient building and a safer building. And we're happy to sit down with each individual customer and navigate that path with them to ensure that they're getting the safest and the most energy efficient space that they can afford.
Thank you for that, Shane. And I think that brings up another topic that actually I have a question on in terms of, the maintenance of the system. I know Tony Garcia, you had brought up, supporting and system support and system optimization. So in your experience, what is the frequency of software updates and security patches, and how is that really handled when you have the multiple, vendors and, things like that?
Yeah, well, yeah, for the most part, on a lot of these systems, there are many software upgrades. There are many software security patches that are available, but a lot of times the customers never receive them. You really have to have a systems integrator that is proactively monitoring these systems, working with the manufacturers when new software comes out, new patches, new firmware. And they happen all the time, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. There's some pretty significant updates. The other thing is, you can't do this like Windows, right? Automatically one day your computer upgrades and then it reboots on you, right? We've all been through that. You can't do that in these kind of solutions, right? We have to, system integrator gets notification from the manufacturer that there's new features or new updates. We then work with the end customer to schedule when we can do those upgrades. Sometimes those kind of things take more than one day. So we want to make sure that we're doing it at a time when the end user is not going to be affected.
No, thank you for that, Tony. And I'm going to actually throw this one out to everyone. I think it's maybe on everybody's mind. Today we're addressing COVID-19 and how do we mitigate that? What can the safe space solution do beyond that? What are the capabilities, right? We talk about IoT, the future of a digitized future. What is that? What does that look like to some of you folks from the seats that you sit in? Whoever wants to start first.
I used to talk about schools before COVID and said, well, a lot of bullying happens in restrooms. And you could actually just have a system that would say, hey, the amount of time people are spending in the restroom seems a little abnormal. Maybe you should send a staff member in there to see something's, not happening that shouldn't be. Or people talked about smoking or vaping in the school. There might be sensors that might alert people of activity that shouldn't be happening in the school. So we have had these unfortunate incidents of violence in the school where shooters get in. And that would be a use case where you would actually know where the students are sheltering in place, where people are hiding, etc. And it would be a lot of useful information in real time to the first responders. So they actually know what's happening in the school. And so their use case after use case. If we are in California, we might get hit by an earthquake at any time. And God forbid, if a school does come down, you would have real-time information of where people were that might need saving first, versus having to go through the entire rubble. Or you would know, whether everyone got out safely, and you don't waste time in areas that you shouldn't waste time. So as we develop IoT, we find use case after use case that lighting up the building with data, with location data, with environment data, with the activities that are happening in the building, you can optimize everything. You might look at the data and say, hey, looks like teachers are walking 5 miles a day. If you rearrange the classes in this particular order, you can have the teachers walk half that distance and students actually get to their classes on time just by seeing what's happening. And it's very interesting. It's like, I didn't think that there are students who might be hearing impaired who lip read. And now if your teacher is wearing a mask, they can't learn at school. Then you need a clear mask. So things like that we don't see, obviously, are things that you learn, and the data will clearly show you that something is happening and you need to go look at it. So for me, we are just scratching the surface. The use cases are endless.
Nice. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would mention a couple of things. So for the last 10 plus years, we've been pushing IoT, and in the dream that there's all these things that we can solve. But in reality, in the first several years, it was really a lighting control system that provided energy efficiency and automation. But I think now, today, it is the turning point, where now the infrastructure is there. The infrastructure was the lighting control system. And once we install these systems and we actually spend time with our customers and we understand what their pain points are and what they're trying to solve, then we can then introduce all these new features and capabilities that are capable with these systems.
Nice. I'm curious, Tony Acernese, how do you see, this shaping out post-COVID, with the Intelli-Temp, product? How does that continue on?
Good question. So the devices were basically designed so that you can actually turn that temperature measuring function on or off. So you don't really always have to use take temperatures. So for instance, the 22-inch device behind me, can still certainly be used to publish, user-generated content. I think we'll likely still be using hand sanitizer in the future, but also many schools are wanting to use it for attendance purposes. So you can still use it to scan in, scan out of a facility. So several other uses, and we continue to develop additional uses based upon customer feedback.
Nice, nice. Well, we've come up to the top of our hour here. I want to thank all of you for taking the time, getting on today's call, sharing your insights, and really, sharing your expertise when it comes to these, really advanced technologies that are really solving some critical operational challenges for schools and facilities across the country. So, thank you all for being here, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. And thank you everybody for attending. I really appreciate it. You'll get a follow-up email coming post the show with some links for updated information about the Safe Space Initiative and how you can move forward if you are interested. So with that, I thank you all, and I hope everybody has a great night.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care.